Praise the Lord, everyone. Minister Kara here with part two of our grief lesson um, in the That Ye May Be Healed series. So, one of the hardest things that I think we have to face is loss. Whatever that loss is, that loss brings pain, and that pain is what brings in grief or a feeling of suffering. It's usually typically preceded by a tragedy or an event that has some kind of deep meaning to us. Death or the loss of anything of value can cause this pain, which results in grief. But we all know and have confidence that God has a higher purpose for us, and He is faithful to use those most painful times to mature us and to draw us into a closer relationship with Him, a closer dependency on Him. And this lesson is part two, which is just designed to provide you a few points to help you through your loss or whatever that loss may be that's causing you pain or the pain of grief. Sometimes loss can produce what seems to be an inhumane level of pain, and that pain can sometimes cause us to shut down, to cope, or to deal. Um, there's no universal pattern for grief, but hopefully these points kind of help you help guide you through just what you're feeling when you are dealing with loss. So the first point would be to resist denying the pain that you're feeling. Don't pretend. We have to be real with what we're feeling. We can't try to just outrun that pain, no matter how hard it is to deal with, no matter how painful it is. Avoid trying to just be strong um, under such pressure or such pain that could come when we're grieving. If we deny the pain of a loss, it can just go unhealed. It kind of took me to this thought, or this point took me to the story of Naomi in the book of Ruth. So Naomi lost everything. So she first was taken from her land. Her husband moved their entire family to another godless land. And then she lost her husband, and then she lost both of her sons. So she lost everything, and she felt bitterness, she felt hopeless, and all of those emotions that kind of come with when we're grieving. But she wasn't afraid to feel her grief. She was in extreme pain. Um, we can definitely probably bet that she was depressed, and she blamed God. And she said around verse 13, "The Lord's hand has gone out against me." She felt that God has afflicted her, He's emptied her of everything, just brought so much misfortune and bitterness over her life. And she expressed that plainly to God and cried out to Him. So we have to do the same when we are dealing with loss or moving through the stages of grief. Is just be real. Don't pretend that the loss didn't happen, that it's not a big deal, that it's not impacting us in areas of our lives. We have to cry out to God and, just express to Him exactly what we're feeling, and be able to deal with that pain that loss has brought on. So in John chapter 11, there's two words that kind of jumped at me, because sometimes we look at crying as a weakness, mostly for men, but some women too, when they're just used to being strong for their families and strong for their friends and strong for everyone but themselves. We look at crying as a weakness, and it's not. So in John chapter 11, one verse, two words, verse 35 says, Jesus wept. This was after Lazarus died, and Jesus knew He was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, but He still wept because He saw the grief that Martha and Mary were experiencing. And those two words gives us permission to cry. Gives us permission to cry in our sorrow, gives us permission to cry in our pain, because they reveal just how Jesus modeled that for us as a normal, natural, response, and it's definitely needed. So think of crying as a normal, natural, and needed response to kind of release that inner pain that's just bottled up. You ever just try to hold down your emotions so tight and so much, and they're fighting against that feeling, and you're fighting against them coming down, and it kind of makes you like your chest hurt, your throat hurt, it's stuck. Um, but that crying is that release, like it's needed. It can cause physical ailments just holding down those emotions. It can cause mental, troubles and chaos, and we have to know that crying is not a weakness, and Jesus showed us that. So if we say that crying is a weakness, men, women, um, then we're saying that Jesus was weak in that moment, and we know that to not be true. So he knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Just like we know that God's going to restore our joy, he's going to open doors if one was just closed on us. He was going to make a way. But Jesus still wept, and it's okay that we cry in our sorrow as well. It's that normal response to the loss of anything of value in our lives, and we need to express that emotion. So we talked about a few moments ago that leaving, not expressing that will cause that pain to go unhealed, and there could be serious problems later. If you continue reading in that first chapter of Ruth about Naomi, when she got back to her land, they didn't recognize her, and she expressed her grief. She expressed her anger towards God and her bitterness and all those feelings that the loss caused in her. She expressed that, and no one recognized her because grief changes what you look like. Grief changes your whole countenance and your behaviors and sometimes your appearance. And could you imagine what not allowing those feelings to be expressed and to be healed through that expression, what that can cause? It can cause behaviors that probably would have never thought we would have engaged in, or just, heaviness on us, and just change our whole personalities if we leave that kind of unhealed, just festering on the inside, and never expressing that. So we don't want to hold that in and deny those feelings because it could cause serious problems later. God gave us tears. Jesus showed that it's a needed natural response, and God gave them to us as a gift to express that grief, express that grief, and as an outpouring of that inner pain. So it's important that we just acknowledge the reality of what was lost. Call it what it is. It had deep meaning to us. It's causing this pain of grief, and remember that tears are not a sign of weakness, they're a gift from God. And let's not be afraid to express that grief honestly, openly with God. He already knows, so we might as well just cry out so He can hear our cries and restore our joy. The second point is just about feeling what you feel. So at some point in our struggle with grief, someone's going to say you shouldn't feel that way, because we're usually expressing, I could have done this, I should have done this, I don't know why this has happened to me. I feel, all these different ways, all these thoughts are going through our minds about how we could have changed the outcome, or if we could have changed the outcome. And someone's going to say, out of love, you shouldn't feel that way, or we ourselves are still trying to just stifle those emotions. But we feel deeply because God has given us a profound capacity to feel. And in my journey through some loss and grief in my life, I had someone tell me that you can't heal what you can't feel. So if you're not willing to feel it, it will never be healed, and you'll be dealing with the emotions of that loss for years to come, and it can definitely change behaviors and just change your whole countenance. So we have to feel it in order for it to be healed. So, just the thought of some of the pain that certain levels of loss or certain loss can cause, it just makes us not want to feel it. We want to stifle it. We want to just move on, get back to business as usual, be strong or attempt to be strong. But if you're experiencing grief for any reason, you have to allow yourself time to mourn that loss and just cry out. It's healthy, it's needed, and it's a natural response. And Jesus modeled that for us before he rose Lazarus from the dead. Another emotion that comes with that is anger. It's okay to be angry. It's not unusual. God's big enough. Just like we saw with Naomi, she was angry. She was bitter. She was depressed. She just cried out and expressed, like, you've afflicted me. But God is big enough. He's strong enough. He's loving enough to handle all of those emotions, including our anger, even when we lash out in severe pain after a loss. Naomi definitely expressed her anger towards God, because sometimes sleeping and eating and working, just plain living, can just become so labored under that emotion. So then areas where maybe we didn't experience a loss of a job could potentially down the line cause us to lose our job. Performance goes down. We can't get out of bed because we're not dealing with grief. So we're so depressed we can't get out of bed and function, which just causes other areas of our lives to suffer as well. So we have to just feel it. And it could be something we're not ready to feel. Sometimes I just want a day where I just ignore the pain that is there. But we can't ignore that pain forever, or it just will never be healed and cause other issues in our lives. All right. The next point would be just to describe what you've lost. Telling yourself, you know, telling God, talking to your pastors, talking to even, a counselor if that's something that you feel that you need. But expressing that kind of solidifies the acceptance of what was lost. So I find that writing it down is better for me than verbally expressing to someone, because I can really authentically get everything and all the emotions that I could not form the words out of my mouth to do. It's easier for me to get all those emotions and feelings and all those things that I'm trying to process in my mind, emptying them out. Think of that as like crying out with pen and paper when your tear ducts have dried up because you've been crying for days or whatever the case may be. This is just another form of that outpouring, that inner pain that could also help you through just describing the loss, the pain that you're dealing with, and helping through that process. Um, it brings some clarity to the feelings you're having, because sometimes they're just vague and you can't really process it. Um, Two examples of in the Bible where um, expressing or describing your pain or what you're feeling occurred was with Job. Right? He lost his children, he lost his wealth, he lost, his good health. So a lot of that we can all identify with that some, one of those areas. And he just says, the one thing that I feared has finally happened. I dreaded this would happen to me. He couldn't find ease. He couldn't be still. There he says, nor am I quiet. So he couldn't find any peace or stillness in his self. He had no rest. And then there's King David, who lost his entire kingdom and was betrayed by his son. So that's a whole nother form of loss, when you feel betrayed or a relationship just kind of comes out of left field and you kind of lose that relationship. And he encouraged his followers to pour out their hearts. So God is our refuge, as Psalms tells us. So these two men were dealing with heartache. They discovered that putting word to their grief helped them to begin to accept the loss or the betrayal in King David's in his situation. So Paul makes it clear that, well, excuse me, even though we are followers of Jesus, we grieve. We will still have experience loss and pain and grief. But we just don't grieve the same way as the world does because we have hope. So we grieve with hope. Hope that's anchored in the reminder that there will be a day where there will be no more death, no more mourning or crying or pain, and we're all looking for that day. So God, He'll walk with you through all those jumbled up feelings and emotions, and when you can't speak a word and all you can do is cry, and when you can't cry or speak a word and maybe all you can do is sit with Him, He can walk with you through all of those feelings and all of those ups and downs and that roller coaster of emotions that comes with just dealing with loss. So we just have to trust Him to understand and offer the comfort that only He can with some of that pain that loss can bring. So you have to also open yourself up to being comforted. The attempts of people to comfort, they're all well intended. They're offered in love. Sometimes to the person who's dealing with the loss or who is grieving, it can just feel empty. But that's the pain. That's the numbing. The coping mechanism of numbness that our bodies kind of go into when we're dealing with that level of pain. But it's important that we don't allow grief to isolate or insulate us from the comfort of other people, our friends, our family. Comfort can be found in the presence and the words of others. So we just have to allow ourselves to be comforted and stay connected, um, to um, other people when we can. And at the right time, um, those, that for the presence of those individuals can provide that needed encouragement and direction for kind of navigating through your pain. Um, and Jesus shows us that on the night He was arrested. He was overwhelmed with sorrow. Um, and He just asked His disciples to stay with Him as He cried out to God and poured His heart out in that, time of trouble, time of sorrow. He just wanted His disciples to sit with Him. He wanted their presence during that time. And their presence was comfort to Him. So the same was true for Job's friends who came to offer their comfort to him in his sorrow, and all they did was sit. They just sat with him for 7 days as he grieved. So, in some cases, it's not words that we need when we're going through that pain. We just need to know we are not sitting alone. We need to feel the presence of someone willing to just sit with us during that process. So, we have to open our hearts to the comfort that other people are offering us, and the comfort offered by God. And in time, it helps to just kind of help us find a renewed sense of strength and perspective. For some grief groups can be helpful. Connecting with others who have maybe suffered the same type of pain or same type of loss can help us gain insight, understanding. Um, especially from those that are further down that grief path that we are. Some professional counseling is also an option for some people that have found that, they found that helpful. I personally found counseling more helpful than I think I would have a group setting. Just that one-on-one time to just focus on me, what I'm feeling, instead of more of a group. Everyone, share their thoughts, share their feelings. But it's a preference and a comfort thing. But don't be afraid to seek help. Um, the writer in Ecclesiastes just reminds us that two are better than one. If one falls, the other's there to pick them up, and we kind of need to be, strengthened at times from others and picked up, lifted up from others. Um, and God forbid we were to fall and no one come to our rescue to help lift us up. All right, and the last point just goes back to the comfort that God gives us in that pain. Grief isn't for us alone. Once God has restored us, we have to, once we've gotten restored from the sting of our loss, we kind of have a duty to share that comfort with others. It's meant to be shared. When you make it through, help pull someone else through their time of struggle and pain. Paul made it clear in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. Um, it says, praise be to our God and Father, our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our trouble so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we have received. So it's about making sure when we make it through the struggle that we can empathize and have compassion. Because those are built through those painful encounters with loss. When we see others through the tears of our own grief, we kind of have a different perspective that uniquely equips us to minister compassionately to those who are in pain. So we can't just, once we've moved past that sting of pain and we've dealt with our grief, and we definitely should not keep that comfort to ourselves when we find those others that are going through the same loss that we have experienced. So let's recap. So the first point that we covered to help you through your grief or your loss is not to pretend. Let's accept the loss and the outpouring of emotions that may come with it, and ultimately remembering that Jesus wept also. So it's a natural, needed response that he modeled for us. 2, feel what you feel. Don't suppress your feelings. God can take it, and it is all part of the process. Cry out every emotion that the loss is bringing up. If it's anger and you want to express that because you blame God, he can take it. He has the shoulders to bear it. Express yourself in some way. Describe what you have lost, whether it's talking to your pastors, talking to ministers and elders, or friends, family, that person that you feel comfortable with, that can offer you or help you kind of process those feelings. Express yourself. Don't hold it all in. Maybe write it out. A letter to God, letter to yourself, whatever that loss is. It could help just put words to your pain to help you process it and move towards complete acceptance of the loss. Open yourself to being comforted. So don't isolate yourself in your pain. Stay connected to others. When we isolate ourselves, that's when darkness kind of rolls in and we get depressed and we don't want to open the curtains and we want to just lay in bed. And that will change our lives. If we sit in darkness too long and don't let the light come in, we're not in our word. We don't allow God to comfort us in those areas. We just want to steal away and hide under a rock. We don't want to stay there too long, and we don't want to isolate. We want to stay connected to others because that's where our comfort and strength and will come from. And then sharing your comfort with others once you have gotten past the point where you have dealt with it, you've cried out, you're beginning to allow that pain to be healed. We have to just share that comfort with others, meaning make sure that we're there to offer the same comfort that we receive from God in that area. If we experience that same loss, we are, uniquely equipped to minister to those individuals in that area because we've dealt with that same pain and we've come through by the grace of God, and that can be a comfort to others. So our comfort, our restoration just isn't for us. And it's not just for the other person. It's a healing. It's like a trade of comfort and healing for each other. So you helping someone else through a similar experience, it's also going to encourage you and help you through the rest of your healing process. So let's quickly turn to 2 Corinthians as we close chapter number 4. starting at verse 16. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, starting at verse 16. For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. So loss causes pain, and that pain, we said, causes grief. So my prayer, um, you know, is that you have heard something in this lesson that will help you through the healing process. Just as 2 Corinthians says, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. So I pray that you've heard something in this lesson that's going to help you to finish through, help you through the healing process, whatever that loss you may have experienced or may be experiencing. Don't lose hope. Our hope, remember, is anchored in the reminder that one day it's all going to be over. There will be no more pain, no more death, no more mourning, no more crying. And that is what we have hope in, and we anchor our hope in, so we can make it one more day. So God bless you. Again, praying that something, one of these points, helps you along your journey and you continue to heal. But let's be real about what we're feeling, and don't feel like we have to be strong when we're not, and don't isolate ourselves when we are feeling so low that we don't know what to do, because there is comfort among the saints, and we can't isolate ourselves, or we may be in darkness way too long or longer than we have to.